Hello and welcome to In the Making, a series of conversations from North Bennett Street School where we connect with a range of new voices, fields, and perspectives. Before we get into our conversation, we want to thank the many supporters that make our programs possible, including the Massachusetts Cultural Council and our partners in craft. My name is Kristen Odell. I'm an NBSS staff member and host of In the Making. The Student Craft program at Berea College in Kentucky has been a part of the Appalachian crafts movement since the 1890s, beginning with weaving in 1893, woodworking in 1895, and broom making and ceramics in 1920. The Student Craft program is a part of Berea's broader labor program, which requires every student to contribute to the operations of the school through a number of job opportunities, including craft. With us this evening are Erin Beal, Associate Vice President of Student Craft, Emerson Croft, Weaving Assistant, and Leroy Mabuta, Biology major and student weaver, all here from Berea. Thank you all thanks for being here this evening. Thank you for leading our 42nd episode of In the Making, and a huge welcome to the three of you.
Yeah, Kristen, thank you so much. Thanks for helping put the program together, for getting so much organized, and for hosting these events, which I think are incredible. I want to start in maybe a way that's a little bit non-traditional, but I find one aspect of my role at Student Craft very awkward, and that is when I'm asked to speak for the program of Student Craft, because we operate as a very tight-knit democratic team here at Student Craft. So while my title often gets me in front of a microphone, I wouldn't have anything to speak about without all of the efforts that other people put into making the program great. So just real quickly, I want to acknowledge Emerson Croft, who you'll meet later, so I won't say too much about Emerson, who's our weaving assistant. Aaron Miller, our director of weaving. Philip Wiggs, director of ceramics. Steve Davis Rosenbaum, director of our craft education and outreach program. Rob Spees, our director of woodcraft. Jedediah Radosevich, our woodcraft assistant. Chris Robbins, director of broomcraft. Andy Glenn, who I believe a lot of you know, who is the head of the woodworking school at Pinecroft, which is a part of Student Craft that really reaches outside the college. Hunter Elliott, who's our director of apprenticeships. I highlight Hunter's name kind of because I think he may be very interesting for a lot of you to talk about. Hunter has helped to organize 13 visiting staff apprentices who come here to Berea College for between 3 and 6 months, work alongside our students. We provide a wage for that. We provide housing, and we will be looking soon for our next round of apprentices. So if you have interest in that, hunt Hunter down off of our website and shoot him an email. I also want to reach sort of outside the staff. We had a very key team of people early on in my time here that includes Glenn Adamson, who a lot of you will probably know, John Prown, who's the executive director of the Chipstone Foundation, Megan Doherty, who was a professor here at the time and is now director of the Museum of the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and fundamentally Stephen Burks, who's a designer who partnered with us early on. Outside of Stephen's design work, he contributed to that group, which was really key to developing some strategy when I first joined Student Craft in 2018. I also want to acknowledge some key visiting craftspeople, Michael Purrier, Robella Wake, who I know was with you a couple of weeks ago. And we're really excited next week to have our second visit down to Berea from Aspen Golan, who I know that many of you know as an alum, and Kelly Harris. And then just to wrap up, I know this is a long list, but we wouldn't be where we are without all of these people. A special thank you to Stephen Burks, who I mentioned before, for his design contributions and strategic contributions. And we have a current program going on with Norman Teague of Norman Teague Design Studios with our ceramic students. So this is a very key group that's helped us in quite a lot of ways, but just the biggest shout out I can give to the team who works here every day with students.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. That's so important. And I'm glad that we could give them all credit. And for our guests, we have a slideshow put together so that our guests, our panelists can talk us through the history of Berea and then into the, what you're making now, what you're doing now, the program now. It sounds like everybody you just thanked, I mean, it sounds like you're in this very, rich moment right now. So this will be interesting to see the rich history and then, where we are now. So I'm going to share this slideshow. We'll breeze through this so that we can then get to Emerson and Leroy. We want to hear about their craft. First series of this is then, and I don't know the years, so maybe you can help us with that as well.
Yeah, it'll be tricky for me for the years, but this is the broom shop, so this would be sometime after 1920. And when I think of the history of Berea College and craft, what is important to know for everyone is the founding mission of Berea College, which was to provide education for whites and freed slaves, people of color, starting in 1855 here in Kentucky. Kentucky was a slaveholding state at that time. So this was an amazingly radical undertaking when the college was founded. We see some more broom making there. We had a candy kitchen. We've had a host of things that can loosely be called craft over the years of our existing, including making these beautiful little tea sugars that were painted with wildflowers and items from country life. So a lot of really interesting things. This is from the weaving studio. So weaving was, while we're very proud of our coeducational heritage, craft often operated in a segregated way with regards to gender. We had the weaver mountain boys and we had the primary weaving studio. So that's what we see pictured here.
Mm-hmm. I love this right here. It's showing the, this boy and the women weaving. I love the duality of that.
Yeah. This may well have been needle craft. So that was a craft at one point. It could also be finishing for weaving.
Mm-hmm.
Here we see some shots from the wood shop.
Right, and this I put this one in here in particular. The wood shop is so meticulous, and I think that a lot of North Bennett Street folks will appreciate that, and just to see a different wood shop, and especially coexisting at the same time that North Bennett was teaching woodworking skills to immigrants coming into the North End. I think it's just sort of poetic that these probably images taken at the same time.
So this would have been very early. An important part about or important and tragic part of our craft history is that craft was started in some ways in response to the oncoming passage of Kentucky's Day Law, which forcibly segregated Berea. So it's only in the first few years of our founding history we opened the wood shop in 1895. By 1910, Berea had been forcibly segregated. So this is a photo that may date to that very early period.
And I just want to make note of their hand planes. You have to look closely. They're using their hand planes propped up on the table. I love that. Weaving studio.
Yeah, so this would be the studio that Emerson's started working in as a student. It wasn't quite this packed, although it was pretty darn packed at the time.
Forgive my ignorance here, but same or similar facility / location?
We just moved to a new location. Weaving moved in 2 years ago. Is that right, Emerson? So Emerson was key helping us move all these looms and get them set up in a new space. So we now have one building that houses the wood shop, the weaving studio, the broom shop is our craft education and outreach program, and our warehouse for shipping finished goods.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's look at what you all are doing now.
So here we have a student. This is out in the broom shop. Nelson, who's an amazing student, an international student from Guatemala who picked up broom making incredibly quickly.
And going back to, as we go through these current images, we're seeing the same product that Berea was making from the early days, correct? And
you're seeing similar products. I think, the product line here is something we're very proud of. It has really flipped over in the last 4 years. So in 2018, roughly 90% of the products that we made were what I would call heritage products. Today, 75% of our current offerings have been designed by students or with heavy student input, within the last 4 years. So the techniques are the same. A lot of the machinery is the same. But the products that we're turning out are intentionally designed to carry a stronger conceptual message with the intention that they're more representative of the students who we serve.
Mm-hmm. And I will admit this is a little bit misleading here because the natural dyes image isn't this for the weaving, not so much the broom making?
It is, and our natural dye program was started by Aaron Miller, who leads the weaving studio. However, we are using these same plants to dye broomcorn, and we actually dye our yarn. We don't dye yarn, generally speaking, we dye finished woven goods. But it all takes place back in the broom shop. In fact, it's not uncommon to have a bunch of placemats and some broomcorn all in the same dye vat at the same time. So here we have Elsa in the ceramic studio working on our people collection mugs. Isaiah in the wood shop. Here's Marco. So we're starting, we're definitely at today, and you can see a sort of a refreshed wood shop. You'll probably get an image of the weaving studio. I hope so, that we have one in there. So you'll see the difference from that old photo.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are in the new weaving studio, brightly colored, a very large open room. And it really is just a beautiful and creative place.
So Emerson, you might be able to answer this clearly. And going back to what Aaron just said, you have a natural dyes program and you harvest those plants on site, correct?
Yeah, we have partnered with the horticulture farm at Berea, so we have a small plot of land next to where they're growing all of our vegetables and things, where we grow things like indigo, madder, chamomile, calendula, other plants that we can use to create natural dyes.
And Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, Emerson, you can answer this, but the dyes, you're dyeing whole weavings, not this individual fiber, is that?
Yes, that makes the most sense for us with our sort of production process right now. It's most efficient for us to weave our products and then take our finished products or a big roll of what will eventually become finished product and throw that in the dye vat.
Got it.
And it is, just to chime in, just so we don't give the wrong impression, excuse me, the vast majority of the brooms that we make and the textiles that we weave are commercially dyed. So our naturally dyed garden is something we're super proud of. It's growing every year since Aaron started it 2 years ago. But you liked that joke, didn't you, Emerson? That wasn't a joke on purpose. But the vast majority of what we use is commercially dyed product.
Got it. So the natural dyed method is new, and it's still sort of in flux.
Correct.
Got it.
So Elaine here working on, spoke shaving a seat for one of our people collection stools. You can see some assembled stools that are not yet painted in the background there.
Mm-hmm. And these are painted. Are they stained, or what's the final product?
It's a milk painted base with then a lacquer top coat.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have students shaving cooling rack parts on the shaving horse.
Cooling rack parts.
Yeah, we make it's really the first joinery product in terms of complexity that students are exposed to. It's got larger slats for the sides with very small octagonal or rectangular spindles that join across. So it's sort of learning the basics of a post and rung joint. So they're working on the cross pieces here, shaping them on the shaving horse.
One of the reasons that I wanted to share these images as well is these are tools that we see and processes we see happening at North Bennett, in every workshop. So they spoke to us over here. The spoke shave, the shave horse.
Yeah. So here's Micaiah working on a product I'm really proud of. It's one of our new products. I'm proud of almost all the products we make, 99%. We've got some old ones we're still trying to replace. This is our intersections cutting board. So this is a cutting board that was a student exploration about intersectional feminist theory and how to represent that on a cutting board. Each one is unique. It is built around a a student designed pattern of inlays. Every single cutting board is that individual student's expression on that individual day.
These are so cool. And I don't have an image up, a face image of the cutting board, but any of our guests, just look it up. It's so beautiful.
So here's Zai in the weaving studio. An amazing thing to me, another part of the program that Aaron Miller helped us expand is the creation of a quilting program. So what we used to call weaving, we really truly today should call fibers, although it's going to take me a few years to make a switch. We had never made quilts in the program here in Berea until this past year. We're really proud. Aaron led the students through an exercise designing these quilts. We have 4 wall hanging quilts, the 2 largest of which have been picked up by Design Within Reach as part of our partnership with the Miller Knoll Company. And the results of that are, 1, some beautiful quilts. 2, 14 of our students and Aaron Miller are formally going to be named as designers when these products launch in hopefully like any day. It's a spring launch for this year, so they should be coming out anytime soon. And Leroy is a significant contributor to this project.
This is such a great project. And I'll just pause here because we'll show Leroy's square in a few images. But Leroy, had you done any quilting prior to this particular project?
No, I hadn't really. It was my first time. Yeah.
And I know you weave as well. So where does your, where have you discovered that your heart lies, weaving or quilting in this moment?
In this moment, probably weaving. I've been weaving for quite some time this semester. So
yeah. It's just amazing that you, I don't know, that this will be produced on such this elevated scale through Design Within Reach. It's just awesome. And that your name's going to be on it. So cool. Oh, there it is. So here's Leroy with your symphony scarf. Is that what it's called again? Yes. Okay. Your symphony scarf, and then your square, your block for the Design Within Reach quilt. So I am going to pause on this. Leroy, can you tell us about your motif in the quilt, the square of the quilt?
Yes, I can. So the quilt was really inspired by Brian Stevens' transitional justice theory. And that's to say, like, anything related to racism and the institutional racism that's within the country should be monumentalized as an educational piece. And so this is an educational piece about that, but specifically about mass incarceration and like the early beginnings of mass incarceration. So initially it was mostly concentrated on criminalizing drug use. And the criminalization really took place in areas that were marginalized, so mostly Black people and people of color. And so the lower left block represents like a gel. So it's an abstraction of a gel, and it's really connected to the upper block within the left section. So that's an abstraction of a syringe to represent drugs. So it's really about like how drug use was criminalized, and that over years, when it started to affect privileged individuals, it started being medicalized into something that could be solved within public health reaches. And just wanted to pull out that hypocrisy and use it as an educational piece. And then on the right side, the lower right side represents a cross, and the cross is like a purple color. And this was really coincidence because within the whole block, we had a set amount of colors we were going to use. And it so happened that it worked well with my design because purple represents royalty. And so this was representing like the people who've been murdered or who've died within the prison system due to this mass incarceration. And it's really to just like advocate for them. And then the upper right block is like an American flag, but it has been abstracted too. And instead of having 12 stars, it has 2 stars to represent the institutional racism that's happening and continues to happen in the US right now within healthcare systems and criminal justice systems. And instead of using like the red and white stripes, I abstracted that into just red to really like say like there won't be peace until this is solved or until people start talking about it. And so it really helps to just put out the word because it's like an educational piece.
Mm. It's so amazing, Leroy. Thank you for sharing that. The image on the left is of your symphony scarf. We will talk about that after the slideshow ends. That's also very profound in how you formed it and what it says to you and to the world. So thank you for that. And just so we can see the whole context of the design, this quilt that's a collaboration with Design Within Reach. Leroy, we can all see where Leroy's square is on the middle left side. Leroy, are the other squares that were done by your peers? I'm assuming these were done collaboratively with your peers. Is that correct?
So each individual got to design their own blog, but we could like give like some feedback if they wanted like feedback on colors and color combinations. But most of the design was like individual but collaborative in terms of like how to put the pieces together.
But all by Berea craft students, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. And are they all speaking to this same social justice theme?
Oh no, all of them, it's like a mosaic of different interpretations and meanings.
Got it. I
That's
love
one thing.
yours. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's one thing I actually really appreciate about these quilts is that because each one of our students who worked on a quilt got to design their own blog, they got to say something that's meaningful to that individual. So the student who designed the one on the middle top, she's of Filipino heritage. And so she wanted to take inspiration from some traditional designs she saw when she lived in the Philippines. The one in the very center, that student just wanted to learn a new technique. And so that educational aspect was what was important to her in designing that blog. So there's a variety of different meanings behind all of them, but each one does have some sort of conceptualization behind it.
Mm. So beautiful. And here's Leroy working on just weaving, or is this part of the symphony scarf?
This is part of, it's both. So this is the symphony scarf, and right now I am, let me see what I'm doing. I am like threading through and just checking to make sure that each thread is in the right section.
And here you are, Emerson, surrounded by indigo. Is this right?
Yes, so this was our process for removing the indigo leaves from their stems, is we took our shoes off and stomped on them a lot.
You obviously love doing this action, I can tell.
It was a lot of fun. We put on some dance music. We had a good time.
And what are you doing here?
Here, I am in the process of warping one of our baby blanket looms. So if you recall a picture early on in the slideshow, we saw a student sitting down near a bunch of cones of yarn, a bunch of string was lifting up around her. So this is a different angle on that same process. So we have the yarn coming directly from the cones into what's called a tension box right there that helps equalize the tension on all of the different threads in there, which then gets wound around the back beam of the loom. After it's wound around the back beam of the loom, then we can connect it to the front of the loom and put it on tension and start weaving it.
How long did it take you to get a grasp of these very complex loom weaving systems?
Not that long, but I feel like they're not as complex as you might think. It's easy to look at it from the outside and think that it's a very intricate process, and it can be at times, but if you take a little bit of time just to figure out how the process works, it's very direct and intuitive.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the last images in the slideshow. This is showing Emerson's incredible work. Tell us about this process of arriving at this baby blanket design.
Yeah, so I started weaving baby blankets my very first semester at Berea. They're woven on a type of loom that's a little bit more physically complicated to weave on. It takes a little bit more coordination. So usually people, once they learn how to weave on those types of loom, that's something that they stick with a lot throughout their time at Berea. And so I was the baby blanket person for a really long time. And when I got to Berea, we were leaning very heavily into the, gender binary with our baby blanket options. We had the pink and we had blue and we had the white, and then we had yellow, which was a little weird. But I knew I wanted to design a baby blanket that was more interesting than just a white baby blanket, but wasn't gendered, wasn't specifically pink or specifically blue, and that had that intention in it from the beginning. And so when Erin Miller arrived in the studio, she gave me the opportunity to design that blanket that had been in my heart for a couple years. And this is what came out of it. It started with water, which is second from the left in this image, where we just got in some gray baby blanket yarn, brand new to us. We'd never had that color before, and I thought it looked really good with the blues that we had. Reminded me of, water in a stream going over some rocks. And then someone else had the idea to turn it into a series based on all four elements. And I take a lot of inspiration from nature. I love being outside. And so I loved the idea of taking not just the water aspect of nature, but all of these different things, the air, the fire, the earth, and turning them into a series of explicitly non-gendered blankets to represent my identity as a non-binary and transgender person.
And how do you feel about this sort of in my learning about you and this blanket and the craft program? How do you feel that this has become sort of a defining object in Berea's commitment to gender equality, that you made this?
It's definitely an honor. It's a little overwhelming to think about it like that, because the way I experienced it is like, oh, I have this idea that I want to see happen. And then everything that's happened after that has just sort of, it's just snowballed in a really weird, but I'm very happy that an object that is sort of, as you said, sort of defining of Berea's commitment to gender equality is looking at gender from an expansive point of view beyond just gender equality between men and women, which there still needs to be a lot of work done on, but also looking at gender equality in terms of non-binary and gender non-conforming people like me.
Thank you. Thank you for that. For both of you, and you can answer in any order, prior to coming to Berea, were you doing any craft work, hand skills based work in your lives before you came to school at Berea?
I can start. I was, but it was not weaving or quilting, which is mostly what I do now. I was doing a lot of knitting and crocheting. I was homeschooled, and so my arts classes consisted of my parents letting me sit in the living room for 4 hours and design my own crochet patterns. So I've been doing that almost my entire life, but it wasn't until I got to Berea that I learned how to weave and quilt, which have sort of taken over my life as the fiber arts that I do the most often.
What about you, Leroy?
Also, it's the same. It wasn't weaving specifically, but I grew up playing the violin since the age of 9, so it was like related to hands, and I picked up some piano. But then I think I started intensely using my hands and my body in general in Berea, and I started like singing, dancing, and doing other like sorts of stuff related to hands within, like, as I started learning how to weave too.
I'm going to take that in a different direction, Leroy. So you're a biology student.
Yes.
How do you, and you love music and dance, and we're going to talk about that in a second with your symphony scarf, but how do you intertwine and navigate the relationship between biology and your craft work? Do you feel and even violin, you played violin, I mean, physical, body, mechanical, how do you intertwine biology and craft?
I think they work hand in hand because I find myself in biology, like using like the concept of like left and right brain. I feel like both are used in all aspects, in as much as some people might think biology is very regimented and there's no sort of creativity allowed. But I find myself like problem solving better because I use some artistic like influence in how I approach a problem. And also it has helped me like in terms of dexterity, because we're always on our hands, on our phones these days, and we don't really work on other things related to hands. So it helps me like the weaving helps me in my lab experience to be more like to fine tune my hand skills. And it also helps on the other side, like in terms of biology and analytical skills, to use those within weaving too. So I've been able to explore an independent study last semester about dyeing. And so we were seeing if we could extract bacterial dyes and use them as a colorant for textiles. So in terms of like, I personally like the interweaving, and that's my intention anyway. I am to just like interweave different concepts. Yeah.
So that takes me to your symphony scarf and the importance of music. So the symphony scarf has a strong connection to one piece of music that is so beautiful. I listened to it last night, and it brought tears to my eyes thinking of you weaving to this beautiful piece of music. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so like it really started because at the time I was listening to this song by Brandy Carlisle and Alicia Keys called "I Have a Voice," and at the time it was speaking to like just voter empowerment. But then as the years have gone, like I've reinterpreted it in terms of just like the diversity of like people, like to be able to create diversity space for people to be able to talk and stuff like that. I feel like was the basis of the song in terms of like raising people's voices, especially those who've been marginalized. So yeah, that was like more on the song. But then within the design, one repeating phrase that I like resonated with was "I have a voice." And so like I translated that "I have a voice" piece like into musical notes. And then within like the program we were using to design our weaving products, I translated that into a weaving notation. And with the help of my supervisor, Erin, we're able to make a sustainable pattern so that we wouldn't have any floats or anything that catches on to like earrings because it's a scarf.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I like the concept of just using like computer science and music and weaving together, because I don't know, I just always like I like the fusion of like different disciplines. I don't know, it's fascinating. I'm still like understanding why I'm fascinated with just like that. But so yeah, then after that it was really a process of like working through the design and being patient with the design, because we started design I think a year before it actually got published. So within that I was able to like fine-tune my like design skills in terms of thinking about structure and sustainability of weaving products. And we're able to design two like variations of the scarf within that. Yeah. And then it's a question, sorry.
No, you said.
Okay. So at the end is when like I think that's one lesson I learned about design, is that sometimes you just have an idea, and as you work through the idea you get meaning with the idea. And so that's what happened with the name of the scarf. the symphony scarf really came at the end of the design.
Mhm.
And it's really, in a symphony, there are multiple things, like there's a string section, there are different sections, and that speaks into the like intertwining of different concepts to make something that looks beautiful and something that can be used. And so I like how that name resonated with the technicality of the design, but it also resonated with the song itself, because it's calling for diversity of different voices and different textures of voices. And so I think that spoke to that too. And it also spoke to the, when you touch it itself, the scarf, it has different textures because it has different weights of yarn. And so within a symphony, there are different like sounds that you hear. So it spoke to that too.
Mhm.
And within that, like with the, this was now more like me just getting more in depth with the meaning of it. Because in the symphony, they're like, if you read music, you could change the sheet music and get a different song. And so that's basically how we came up with the two versions of the scarf, because one of them speaks more to the pattern and the other to the texture, but still it's within the same framework, often like a symphony, if you think of it that way.
Yes.
So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Leroy. Emerson, a question about, so you were a student and now you're an instructor.
Of sorts, yeah.
Of sorts. Can you talk about things that you learned as a student that you were passing along to new students as a staff person? Something
Yeah,
that
well,
you've learned.
There's obviously the, very direct techniques that I learned, because I learned how to weave as a student at Berea. And so I'm able to pass that along to my students. One thing that's been especially rewarding for me recently, as springtime is peak design time for student craft. In the fall, we're working on production to fill needs for the holiday season. And in the springtime, we can take a step back from production and start working on what we'll be making next year. And since I was able to go through that process of designing the Element series of baby blankets and going through that as a student, and then now I've gone through and designed some of just my own personal work, it's really rewarding for me to be able to guide students through the design process. Like a little teaser, Leroy is working with another student to make what we're hoping will be a pillow next year. I've been working closely with them on, and it's been so much fun to just walk through that process. And then there's, part of being a labor supervisor at Berea, being in charge of students, is just giving them general guidance in life, not just related to what the work that they're doing, but I have students ask me how to handle tough situations that they're facing. And it's really rewarding to be able to think back on some challenges I faced as a student and how I navigated those, and thinking about what I feel like I did well and what I would do differently, and being able to share that transparently with my students. And Berea can be a tough place sometimes, and it doesn't have to be if you have good people around you. And so I try to be that for students that I interact with every day.
Thank you. Thank you for that. A question that might be an Erin question, or Emerson, if you want to throw into this, can you talk about the overall educational model of Berea and how the craft work program fits in?
Go ahead, Em.
I can take it as both a student and a staff member now. The overall educational model is, it is like any other college. You're taking classes, you have a area of study that you're specializing in. But on top of that, we have our labor program. So every student is required to work at least 10 hours a week for the college in some way. A lot of people think it's only at craft, but that's not true. We have a little under 100 students working for us now, and students can work anywhere from dining hall to grounds, working in facilities management, cleaning residence halls or classroom buildings. But they can also work at craft. I think they have a pretty good deal if they do. The point of the labor program is to teach students more real world skills that they wouldn't really be able to learn in the classroom. A lot of teamwork, time management, accountability, scheduling. And then on top of all of that, in the craft program, we obviously want to teach our students how to do the craft that they're learning and doing every single day, but we also want to teach them. It is about the hand dexterity. It's about learning the process of designing something. It's about some students are more interested in the business aspect of it and want to learn how we, manage our production quotas and things like that. But we're more interested in making well-rounded and confident students with an appreciation for the arts, more so than we're interested in making professional craftspeople. I'm very much the exception and not the rule. Erin, if you want to add anything to what I said, please feel free. No,
I don't think so. I think that Emerson just provided a great example of why it's so important to recognize everyone who's a part of this team, because in a lot of ways, this team works best if I just stay out of the way. It's such a powerful group. And that extends beyond the staff to the students themselves. So it's a great team for me to have a tiny little role in.
Emerson, I've heard you say before, use the phrase student-led, story-focused. Can you explain to us what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's sort of this relatively new direction that we're taking craft, and it's been in the works for several years at this point. But the way that the process kind of went before was the directors in charge of each studio would design a product, usually based on some kind of market need or desire, and then students would just learn how to make it and produce it, which was fine. That's how it was when I first got to Berea, and I still enjoyed my experience doing that. But as we've shifted in recent years, we want students to be the ones designing the products. We want their stories to be told through the products that they're designing. So we really want the students who make this whole thing possible. Like, I'm out of town right now. I have been out of the studio since Monday. My supervisor, Erin, has been the same. So our students have been flying solo all week, and I am completely confident that everything's going totally fine and that they know what they're doing. So they're leading the studio themselves right now, and working on design work independently, telling their own stories in ways that are comfortable for them to be telling them, being completely hands off and out of the loop. And that's sort of the direction we want to keep going in, where our students are confident enough and knowledgeable enough to be able to be the driving force behind student craft, telling their own stories, sharing things that are meaningful with them through the products that they're designing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Emerson, what was your, well, I'll present this a question that a guest gave us, and then I'll add something onto it. How did you end up at Berea? What was the decision for you to choose Berea as your college, for both of you?
I'll start again. I graduated high school young and needed to either go to a small school or the state school right in town and could still live with my family. And I love my family. I know they're tuned in right now watching, but I kind of wanted to get away. And when I went to visit Berea's campus, I just sort of fell in love. I loved the atmosphere and the environment. I didn't even know that working in student craft was remotely a possibility at the time, so that had no influence on my decision at all. It was just, I liked the vibes. And so I applied, I got in, didn't apply anywhere else because I was happy with my option.
What were you planning to study though? What was going to be your major?
Biology, and that's what it was. I was on the pre-med track. I was going to go to medical school. I still got all my prereqs in. I could if I changed my mind, but I think that'd make Erin sad if I left.
And you, Leroy?
Well, for me, like finding the college really was like serendipitous, because I was watching a video of a lady called Carly Day singing, and I showed my dad like, oh, look, they're singing. And then my dad told me, oh, this is actually the Berea arts like festival, like, oh, it was an eco-spiritual festival. So it was like, oh, what's Berea? And then my dad told me everything about it and how it's like based on a work study program. And I like that because I grew up in boarding school. So in boarding school, like you go to school, but after school there are chores that help the whole school. So I feel like that was going to translate easier for me in Berea. And really I just moved from Zimbabwe and I was new to the whole system of colleges and universities. So I just applied to that one, hoping I could get in, and I got in. So, yeah.
Thank you. Our guests, now's your chance to ask Emerson and Leroy and Aaron questions. So you were both biology majors, and you both had an inclination to craft and making things, as you know, you already told us before you came to Berea. For other students at Berea who maybe don't have that inclination, or aren't, you know, don't do hand skills based work, how do you think a job in the craft labor program would enhance their major? I'm trying to get at how the two speak to each other from that academic side of things.
One very specific example that I can think of is I was really into like the nitty-gritty microbiology, cellular biology kind of stuff. And so when I was taking an advanced cell biology class, we were learning about protein chains. And if you think back to high school biology, proteins are just a bunch of amino acids in a big long string that get twisted around in all sorts of ways to make the proteins in your cells. And so when we were learning about that, I found it very intuitive because I had this innate understanding of how string can interact with itself to create a structure. So that's one way that I was able to connect the two, that rather than like my experience with weaving and with fibers was directly applicable to my biology degree. Sometimes it's easier for me to find things the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in terms of like thinking about it more broader, in terms of mindfulness, I feel like working at weaving makes you very mindful of everything. So like when I'm working in weaving, I'm listening to sounds and I'm also working on the pattern, and everything like in my body needs to like be attentive in a sense. And so like that translates to most things I'm in or in class, like being mindful, and it gives you like a great like opportunity, like a break to think about things, I feel, instead of always like on STEM, it gives you like a kind of a break, and then you come back rejuvenated with different ways to think about things, as Em said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if I could just, I'm sorry, Kristen, but if I could just tag on to that, I think there are a lot of instances where students arrive in student craft and they're not thrilled, because when you arrive at Berea in your first year, your assignment for a labor position is random. So many students arrive here in craft, they have not only no experience, but the honest truth is in many cases, they have no interest. What we have found is that by encouraging them and supporting students to discover their own creativity that's already inside them, that is in many cases untapped, they find a tremendous amount of joy in that. And so some students find joy in working in craft because it's their first time to have a space that's safe to be creative. Other students do find direct correlations. I'm thinking about a student named Oscar who works in the wood shop, who's a brilliant chemistry student. Oscar is an important part of the wood shop. I don't think he likes woodworking all that much, but he's become fascinated with the idea of chemical delignification of wood. So removing the lignin using chemicals and then forcing epoxy using a vacuum press into the space left by that lignin, which creates a transparent piece of wood. This is real recent research coming out of the Forestry Institute at the University of Wisconsin. So Oscar has found a way to marry what he is passionate about with the work that he has in his labor position in the craft program. And we have a number of students who wind up finding that sort of special synthesis that works for them. And then it's important to say that we have a lot of students who are key members of our team who I don't think really like craft all that much, but they love the environment and they love the fact that it's a very, very different experience to what might be a very regimented and demanded experience on the academic side of the house. So we'd have students here who really see craft as sort of an antidote or a place to relax, as Leroy said, to be mindful in a different way than they might be able to do as part of their academic studies. So it's a real mix of different experiences. But I think the key thing that we're really focused on now is trying to encourage every student to recognize that they are creative today, that they were creative before they showed up at craft, and that they will be creative for the rest of their lives, that they hold that inside of them. And unfortunately, I think that the general public education system is not doing a great job of making sure that people know that.
Yes, well said. Thank you, Aaron. I'm going to wrap this up with a sentiment and ask for your last words, Emerson and Leroy, on just a sentiment about how impressive it is and how awesome it is to me, and I'm sure our guests, that, you know, Emerson, you brought in this non-gendered baby blanket, which has become this sort of, you've affected change in the timeline of Berea. You've cemented and affected this sort of new moving forward change. And Leroy, and you to a certain extent, Emerson, I'm not sure if you're part of this, but having your work represented with Miller Knoll, it's just so impressive, and I'm so excited for you both. What, you kind of both already spoke to this, but how does that make you feel that you have a point in time where you've affected the future of a long-standing institution?
Okay, I can go.
Sorry, that was long-winded, but
That's okay. Yeah, like I said before, it's a little overwhelming if I think about it too much. Knowing that craft has this 130-year history at Berea, and I've just, in what feels like a very small way to me, like those blankets are very important to me, but to me it was just me doing my job. You know, I wasn't doing anything super special or with the intention to make such a dent in the history of student craft. It's wild. I'm so grateful for all of the opportunities I've been afforded through my work with student craft, including this talk here, the classes I've taken, other videos and interviews I've been a part of, and just the opportunity to have this job here that I have now. It's just incredible. I'm so grateful to have the job that I have, to be working with the people I work with, to have the kind of support that I do, and to be able to give the kind of support that I sometimes wish I had more of as a student.
I guess for me, because of time, for me, I think it's like more so like I'm grateful that the design process has kind of been appreciated, and again, like sharing the sentiment with M, like the design process is where like I was at initially. I was like, oh, let's just design something and put it out there, and so like I never expected to maybe make a lot of waves, but I just like putting it out there, I think is the most like satisfying part of the job, and the active part of it, like we're making meaning as we talk about it.
Well, you both just used the language, you put a dent in something, a dent causes a ripple, causes a wave, and you two have done that. It's so awesome.
Thank
And
you.
yes, and thank you all. Thank you, Aaron, Emerson, and Leroy, for spending your evening with us. And Thank you to our guests for spending the evening with us. And I'll leave one last sentiment from one of our people. You clearly both have a really strong design vision, and it's wonderful that you've been able to use that. And thank you to everyone so much. We appreciate your time. And we will see you at the next In the Making.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Emerson.
night.
Thank you, Leroy.
Yep, very much. Have a great evening, everyone.